amazing amount of people. Thank you so much for coming on a Saturday afternoon when I'm sure you can be doing other things, but it's great to see you here. And thanks to Isolt, to Malcolm, to Donna on the front desk, everyone at Street Level who've been fantastic to work with. And it's, as a photographer, it's such a privilege to have an exhibition. A lot of our lives are fragments. You cover a story, maybe one picture gets used in a newspaper, maybe something gets used in a magazine 5 years later. And as the world's become digitalized, the places to have stuff published has become smaller and smaller as there are less and less magazines. I used to work for Marie Claire, a women's magazine, which always had an international story alongside the fashion and makeup. And that no longer exists, it's only online. Oh, and if anyone really needs to sit down, there are a few seats in the corner, so please help yourself. All right, lost that train of thought now. Why embroidery? As photographers, besides wanting to get things exhibited, it's also what you do with all the images you've acquired. And photography is about memory. It's about recording, and then you want to do something with it. And I am primarily a photographer. I think of myself as a photographer. I'm certainly not an embroiderer, and it's deeply embarrassing to be measured as such in a way, because I break all the rules. I always start with a knot, whereas you're meant to do 2 stitches. And I do it my way. And everything's a bit untidy, it's a bit skew-whiff. I'm not very good at straight lines. But I also love textiles. And because I've been so lucky to travel in the course of my work, I always try and pick up something that's from the area that I'm visiting. And it's been great to be able to repurpose that. So a scarf from Guatemala is the backdrop there. One from Eritrea is there. From Niger, there's the cloth that women wear as a skirt. There's some batik from Sierra Leone. And for International Women's Day, from Le Jour de la Femme, from Central African Republic, the piece of yellow material there. Sorry if you already know this, but this sewing thing started during lockdown because suddenly, thanks Malcolm, suddenly I wasn't able to travel the way I had been doing, and I had to stay at home, and so I thought I would tackle the archive, which is a room in my house. It's actually also a dark room, but full of boxes of prints. And I did some edits. Then I found that you could actually print on material on a printer, domestic printer, which I did for the first ones, did it rather badly and used a lot of ink. So Egypt in the corner there, I actually did on my printer. Then I discovered the most wonderful print company. So if anyone wants textiles printed, contrado.co.uk or .com is the company to go to. You upload a picture, you specify a size, and it comes back in the post. Very reasonably priced and much better printed than I could do. Right, now where do I start with this? I'll start with Rwanda, because this was the first quilt I made, and this was sort of aligned with, this is way before lockdown. This was in the 1995 to be precise. And it was at the same time I was also working on an HIV/AIDS project with my agency network, and very influenced by the AIDS quilts that had been made in memory of people who died of AIDS in the early 90s. And I had done an assignment, an unpaid assignment, working with African Rights to document survivors of the genocide in Rwanda. And my task was to photograph survivors who'd given testimonies, who'd told their stories. And so I ended up with a lot of portraits which I felt didn't do justice to the words, that I wanted to make something that went beyond just being sort of passport pictures. And there's a wonderful process called liquid light. It's a chemical you buy. In the darkroom, you paint it on material, on paper, on mugs. You can put it on anything. And then when it's dry, you expose it like you would a negative. You expose your negative, onto the coated material. Basically, you're making your own printing paper, then develop it. And that's what I did with these. Because I'm impatient, and I washed some of them, the water was too hot, and pieces of the faces disappeared. And a happy accident in some ways. I've used it as a way of recognizing that after the trauma of having your family killed, your life's not going to be the same. Bits of it are missing. And so I feel that it doesn't matter that not all the faces are completely visible. It references those family members who've been lost. And then I also did a little bit more during the Bosnia conflict of faces from Bosnia. One of my favourite quilts is actually the one in the corner, which is Egypt. And it's so unlike anything else. But I'd gone to Cairo for a Christmas holiday after the events that were the beginning, or not the beginning of the Arab Spring, because it began in Tunisia, but of change in the Middle East. And in the center of Cairo, there were these wonderful murals all down Mohammed V Street, painted by graffiti artists seeking a change. And so the birds, this graffiti here of birds wearing gas masks, was actually painted on the wall. It was in response to the events in Tahrir Square. And I had that image, and then I also had images of the flat where I was staying, just by Tahrir Square. Every night at sunset, the pigeons would come home to roost. And I took a sequence of pictures and have sewn those together. And it's a bit unlike anything else. And I haven't been able to repeat that. This is very much an evolving process, and each time I think about doing something, it comes out a bit differently. Yeah, I think that's what I can say about that. So Central African Republic. I'm very fond of these two people. I discovered a wonderful stitch called feather stitch, and it's great for giving people halos. And of course, there's no religious reason why they should have halos, but I feel that within our iconography, if that's a word, that there is a thing of recognizing, of elevating, and it's why I put flowers on some people, or it's a way of recognizing that you've had a relationship with those people, they've posed for you. These are Twa people who've been really chased out of the forests. Central African Republic could be an incredibly rich country. It's got minerals. And unfortunately, most people don't benefit from that wealth. And the forests are being cut down, taken out of the country. But there are halos here, and then they're echoed over in Brazil on the other side. There are women living on an island in the Amazon whose lives are also threatened by deforestation, by the environmental calamity we're about to live through, if we're not there already. So they've also got little halos. These are from Chechnya, which was a trip. I was really fortunate. It was self-funded. I happened to ring up the Salvation Army, who I knew worked in Chechnya this is during the Second Chechen War. And I said, any chance of being able to visit your work in Grozny? And they said, oh, let me make an inquiry, and came back straight away and said, if you can get yourself to Moscow, someone will meet you, put you on a plane to Rostock, and then drive you into Chechnya. It's always worth making phone calls. They don't always work, but sometimes the right call at the right time. It's one of the most terrifying trips I've ever been on. Russian roadblocks are not to be laughed at, mocked. You have to take them seriously. And the city was destroyed, Grozny. There was very little left of it. This poor woman, Taus, she was hiding her teenage son. She was terrified he'd be taken by the Russian army. And I don't speak Chechen, I don't speak Russian. I had a wonderful interpreter. And this all comes across as my work, but it's not. It's the work of many, many people, fixers, commissioners, writers, translators. And as a photographer, you sort of get put on a little pedestal sometimes, but it's only there because of the background people. Anyway, back to how the images look. I started doing these eyes, which are used a lot visually, I suppose, and I like doing them. And once I learn how to do something, I mess up a lot. The reason I print stuff onto material and not paper is that you can unpick it, and it's great. You don't have to reprint anything. You just undo. You get a stitch ripper, undo the stitches, and redo it. So that quite a lot of that went on. So this was Chechnya, and then I've echoed that with Gaza today. So the very last thing, quilt, hanging, whatever. I haven't been to Gaza since 2009, but when I was there, it was at the end of a bombing campaign, Operation Defensive Shield, I think it was called. But I've taken those pictures from 2009. The thing you can do is also the freedom of sewing, unlike being a documentary photographer where you have to be totally accurate and, you know, this is now, this was then. But I've used my old pictures. This baby had been kicked by a soldier and was in the Shifa hospital, which we've had a lot about recently. And this baby in an incubator as well. So I've echoed the eyes there. Okay, any questions on anything in this room? Yes?
I'm intrigued to know what the eyes symbolize.
I suppose it's surveillance, possibly, or living. It's people. For me, it represents people. That these are not just an empty building, but it was a lot of people's homes. So it's a very crude symbolic reference, I suppose. It can be what you want it to be as well. But I think also in all cultures, the sort of symbol of the eye has a lot of weight behind it. I'm not an anthropologist either. It's the thing of being a photographer is you skim a lot. You never have to be an expert in a way. 1 minute you're photographing dogs or whatever, and the next minute you're running around the streets photographing a demonstration, and you get the general gist of what it is. I didn't go to photography school. I did a degree in European studies with French as a language. My French is appalling because it was 1968 and the university I was meant to be at was on strike for the whole year. So I learned no French, but Sussex taught you to read a lot and to know a little about a lot. So you can sort of hold your own until someone asks a tricky question. Any other questions on anything in this room? No? I just want to say about Sudan and this sort of altarpiece. It feels like an altar, or it feels like they're little icons. And again, a conflict that's happening now and is so little reported on. People disappearing, people losing everything, losing their homes, losing their livelihood. And so this is my homage, whatever, to Sudan. And this picture here is from one of the Palestinian demonstrations from November, I think. And it's about to be sewn on. I haven't quite got to the sewing stage with it. I've been doing a new series on protests. So I think it's a good motto: let your heartbreak politicise you, radicalise you, organise you.
What threads did you use? Embroidery threads? What was it?
DMC,
Yeah,
yes.
yes.
And quite a lot of them are the shiny ones.
Yes. I thought that.
Which are lovely.
They're beautiful, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's very inspiring, yes.
Oh, thank you, darling. That's so nice. Yeah, and also it's nice when you, it's in the Gaza one there,
Right.
when you break them up.
Yes, that's
and
very
have them
effective,
hanging. Yeah. Recycling, that's what I was going to rabbit on about reusing things. So not only am I reusing negatives, also these two lovely prints at the back on canvas were from an exhibition in Austria that I never got to, but they very wonderfully printed big images for me. So Ayak and Razia are here overlooking everything. Ayak, as a young mother, she was 18 and she just buried her baby who died of hunger unnecessarily, as many of the deaths from hunger are. And Razia's husband, the Afghan woman on the other side, she's the one who appears 3 times in the exhibition. Afghanistan, I've been going to since 1988. The first time I was with a women film crew. And then I've gone back. And as a photographer, it's quite often what people want to do is to revisit. And we're very lucky because we can record how times have changed and the differences between one point in time and another. And then you feel that you have to be like a preacher and tell everyone about it. But that's why I'm here. Thank you for being an audience. All right. This is another sort of bit different. I'd been in Iraq when Saddam Hussein was there and then went back afterwards. And the first time when he was ruling, there were pictures of him, there were murals of him everywhere. And then in 2003, 4, suddenly they'd all disappeared, all been defaced, and people had vented their anger on the image of the ex-president. And so I collected these together and sewed them together in a slightly mad way. That's the story behind those. Okay, Afghanistan, which this is sort of what do you do when you've spent between 88 and 2011 photographing women in a place, and then suddenly you can't go back and work, and they don't have the freedom that they once had. So this seemed to work. I took my old pictures from Afghanistan. I painted out they're black and white prints. I painted out the backgrounds and then added embroidery to hide the faces to symbolize the loss of freedom. And it's amazing to have a whole wall where I can spread them out. Very lucky and very important to have a space to shout about Afghanistan and the fact that things aren't getting better for anyone there. Any questions? Yeah? Yes?
Did you paint on the prints, then scan them, then have them printed on the fabric?
Yes.
Paint on the fabric?
No, I painted on the print
And then
because I have rather a lot of prints. And a couple of them are digital. Oh, and this is just a straight photo because it had quite a nice background, so I just went with that. And this one was black anyway. But yeah. Yes.
I really like how they're not all the same size frames. Do you
Yes.
know the reason why you chose?
No, that's just the way I am. You know, if even with a ruler, I can't get anything straight. And yeah, they're all slightly different. And I could have trimmed them all down, I suppose. But and also, I have a wonderful neighbour who makes frames. And so he made the frames for me. And didn't seem to matter that some are 2 inches, 2 centimetres different to the others.
So you made all of the prints first and then...
Yeah, I did all of the sewing, and then I very laboriously had to sew the embroideries onto hardboard at the back, it's sort of zigzaggy stitching, holding it tight, and then Enzo, then I measured them accurately-ish, and then Enzo made the frames. Yeah. So, yeah.
I was wondering how much like traditional crafts and like hobbies and textile work you were influenced by in the countries that you visited, and the women that you reported.
Yeah, good question. Yes. Well, I suppose I'm influenced by textiles, and I love collecting colourful things, really. And I have been to some Indian. There's a wonderful woman, Amajit, who teaches Indian sewing, embroidery. So that's the little mirrors are very, well, they're not bad. It took me a few goes to get them there, but that was from going to classes in London. And I've been to Palestinian embroidery classes, which are good fun because you sit around, drink a lot of tea and natter, and everyone is speaking in Arabic, and I'm learning Arabic, but not very good. So I suppose I've absorbed those things. Ideally, I would get a travel grant and go to a particular place and study the embroidery. But you can also do a lot online and in libraries, books. Yeah. But mostly it's, made up. And then somebody asked me about the thread I used, which is this very lovely DMC silky thread. And so I discovered that it's quite nice when you pull it apart. So I did the stitching and then sewed it down. And then I had beads. I thought, why not beads? And then knitting with sequins. Why not do a bit of that? I think I've probably exhausted the repertoire now.
I do love these ones in particular. I feel like they really celebrate the women in the pictures.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of my work is a bit grim, I'm afraid. A lot of the things are very difficult. You know, I've dealt with death, destruction, war, and I think you need to have something that celebrates life as well. And the spirit of survival, and often when people are in the most difficult situations, that's when they shine, and that's when they support each other and carry on. You have to eat. You have to feed your family one way or another. Yes?
I think it was mentioned earlier that you started embroidery during lockdown, is that right?
Yes.
So are you going to continue this relationship, photographs and embroidery, and like develop this, or what's next?
Oh, like everyone, I don't know what's next, but I will continue it probably. I've sold a lot more pictures as embroideries than I have as pictures, photo pictures really. And because in some ways photography's become very easy, that everyone has a camera in their pocket, on their phone. In other ways, it's you want to do something that stands out, that's different in a way. The thing about embroidery is you can watch television at the same time. It's a much more sociable activity, or you can sit with other people and be part of a group doing something. And I think it's a very different way of behaving. And yeah, and I suppose I don't know, the world we live in, you have to make a space for yourself, don't you? And you have to shout about what you're doing, and I do this, and, or hopefully other people do it for you as well. And there's the dreaded Instagram, and you know, you build up a little following, and then you think, oh, all right, I'll do something about this. And like, how do you say something about Gaza as a photographer? Because you can't go there. And so embroidery has been a way of doing that. Hopefully, peace will break out worldwide and I can leave conflict behind, but don't see it happening anytime soon.
Thank you very much, Jenny, for your input and your time. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Well.